Welcome to Ghostly.
Does Walt Disney haunt this earth?
Ghostly is a podcast that comes out every other week. In each episode, we take a ghost story or paranormal event and look into its complete history. Rebecca then gives us evidence proving that the story is real, and my job is to debate those pieces of evidence and get you, the listener, prepared to vote on if it's real or not. If you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button. And as always, we're your host. I'm Pat.
And I'm Rebecca.
So I want to start this off by apologizing for not doing this episode in December when we said we were going to do it. I got sick. Rebecca got sick. I got sick again. Rebecca got sick again.
Yeah, I'm still working on the second one, so if my voice is a little weird today. But we are so excited to be back.
We are definitely excited to be back. And we hope you enjoyed the predictions episode with Jacob Mayfield. Jacob Mayfield actually is going to be a special guest on our Ghostly X live stream, where if you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to Patreon for that. But he's also going to be giving a one card reading to each person that is involved in the live stream. Yeah,
absolutely. So if you haven't checked out Patreon yet, this is a great time to do that.
Absolutely.
And if you haven't listened to that predictions episode, definitely take a listen. Always fun. And in fact, if you like today's episode, we just did a similar one in a way.
Related.
One, I should say, related on our Ghostly X live stream that we just did.
Yeah.
So.
And it was about the Haunted Mansion ride.
Yes.
So, which actually has a lot of frickin' history, I gotta say.
Yeah.
I was surprised. I didn't think a ride would have that much history, but
there you go.
Okay, so we're going to be doing Walt Disney. Now, we're not doing Disneyland per se, although it's going to be covered in this. We're not doing Disney World per se, but it's going to be talked about in this. We're not going to be doing each individual film, but some of them will be talked about. So I'm sorry if I miss your favorite film in here. There's just an overabundance of history when it comes to Walt. Some good, some bad. Yeah,
but we're talking about Walt Disney, the man, the myth, the legend, whatever you want to say about him. And we do just want to mention, we know that his history, like a lot of history, isn't always perfect. Certainly there are issues of racism and sexism and
probably womanizer.
or
something.
All of the things that we know. Yeah. But we're going to focus on him and his relationship to the company, and the movies and the things that came out. So that's kind of our focus for today. And then, of course, does he still hang out here? That's the real question for today.
Okay. All right. Well, this is the part where we usually do shout outs on Ghostly. The first way to get a shout out would be to give us a review on Apple Podcast. And the second way and the last way is to become a member on Patreon. All you need to do is just go to ghostlypodcast.com, click on Patreon in the menu bar, and we have a lot of different tiers to choose from.
And if you want to be on live with Jacob, if you want to test it out for a month, you want to choose that VIP tier.
Yeah, that's if you want to go live. If you just want to hear the episode, there's other tiers you can choose from.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. We'd be happy to direct you in the right direction. But we do have a review on Apple Podcast. Rebecca, can you read that review?
Absolutely. So we got this from Det Marty Hart.
Yes. And it's 5-star too.
I don't know. 5-star entertaining.
Yes.
My favorite podcast is Gruesome. I have not listened to that.
But what a name. What a name that is.
Great name. I am all caught up, needing a fix. I began to look for a paranormal podcast where the hosts aren't screaming or dropping F-bombs every 30 seconds. Basically, I was looking for quality content presented by grown-ups. This is it. Very entertaining. Being a native Chicagoan, Southside. I've been privy to several of the stories. I look for logical explanations, and I'm pretty good at debunking claims. Having said that, I've seen some weird stuff. I can't dismiss ghosts. Great podcast. Highly recommended.
Well, thank you, Det Marty Hart, detective.
I don't know. I'm not going to try to guess. But thank you. And we would love to hear your weird stuff stories.
Yes. And if you do have weird stuff stories, all you need to do is just send it to us by email. You could email us at info@ghostlypodcast.com, or you can use the contact us form on ghostlypodcast.com. Or one of our favorite ways is actually getting it in the mail itself. So you can send that to P.O. Box number 264, Geneva, Illinois 60134. And, since we understand everybody listens to podcasts differently, you probably aren't going to remember that. So you can just go to ghostlypodcast.com and scroll to the footer. All the information's there that you would need.
Absolutely. So I do have a listener mail for today. This is one that relates back to Poinsett Bridge. Which is an episode we did not too long ago. Cosmic Ember. Ooh. I don't know if that's a name or a nickname.
Oh, whatever it is, I think it's cool.
We'll take it. So it says, I have visited that bridge many times, and you said you had to walk a good way to get to it. You park across the street, you walk across the street, and it's literally right there. You can see it if you drive by. If you walk over the bridge and up a bit, there's a cave. I myself went out there, I'm guessing, at dusk and caught a large red orb on film.
Nice.
Never heard any sounds out there, but the energy is off.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I mean, we don't visit a lot of these sites that we're doing episodes on. Like, I never met Walt Disney, so I don't know personally who he is and how he was. So I really am thankful for people that write in and give us that heads up. Hey, you're a little wrong. It wasn't a far walk.
Yeah,
that's great. Thank you, Cosmic Ember.
But I also like it is some weird energy.
Oh, I didn't like that part at all. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you, Cosmic Ember. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. So we also have some poll results. Always got to get those in here.
We got to do it, I guess. We haven't done it in a while. This is the first of the year that we're doing it.
So it's been so long. Even though we did December episodes, but you know. Anyway, so this was from the Red Lion Pub.
Yes.
So we had Mondo on and Jeannie on that episode. And yes was 42.9 and no 57.1.
Yeah, and the overall rating was 3.86. Now, from what I hear from reading the comments that people left, it's mostly because it's a new building now. So had it have been the old building, some people would have voted differently.
Yeah. So, there you go. Take it. You doesn't have to change your mind, but that's where we landed.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's actually pretty good for both sides there. So,
all right. I do have a ghost story.
Oh, a ghost story.
It's time for a spooky tale from our bad girl.
I love Disney. I'm one of those kids that grew up as a fan and still am, even now in college. I decided to apply for the Disney College program and I got in. I'm at Disneyland, working at a store on Main Street, and I love it. Sometimes the guests are a little rude, but overall it's been a great opportunity. Something weird happened though. So every night when I leave, I always look at the fire station. That's where Walt Disney had his apartment when he would secretly stay when he was at the park. Supposedly, you would know if he was there because the front light would be on in the apartment upstairs. Today, employees usually turn the light on during the park hours as a tribute to Walt. So I met this employee who does work at the fire station, and one of his jobs is to turn off that light. He told me he'd give me a behind-the-scenes tour of the apartment after I finished my shift. I know what you're thinking, but I promise it was all above board. Anyway, I met him last night right before the park was closing, and he took me on the tour. It was amazing. It really felt like Walt was there. You can just feel his presence there. One of the last things my friend did was to turn off that front light. He gave me a look and said, "You see, I turned it off, right?" I said, "Yes, of course." He said, "Okay, I just have to be sure. Let's go." When we got downstairs and he started to lock everything up, I went to look back up at the apartment from the street now that I had been in it. The light was back on. I immediately told my friend someone must be still up there. He went and looked himself from the street and started shaking his head. "No," he said, "no one's up there." At least, not anyone we can see. What? I asked. He told me, sometimes Walt's ghost is up there. And if he's not ready to leave, he turns that light back on. It happens a lot, he said. In fact, we've been told just to leave it if it happens because he'll just keep turning it on. I wondered if it would happen tonight, and that's why I asked you to confirm if I turned it off. I have to say, this is probably going to be the best thing that's happened to me on this internship. I was in the same space as Walt. It's creepy, yes, but it's also kind of special.
All right. Well, as always, I have to ask you how much of this story is based on any factual thing.
So it is based on a ghost story that we're going to talk about, but I made up like these particular characters.
Oh, okay. All made up. You're saying.
No, not all made up. Mm-hmm. I do want to mention though, I have a new job, and one of my things in my new job is helping students get those Disney internships. Yeah. Not that I'm the decider or anything.
But you spoke with the people at Disney.
I did. It's really exciting.
Wow. Maybe one day you can go see that apartment.
Maybe.
All right. So we're going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to get to the history.
Facts. From a skeptic point of view. Facts. He presents it all to you. Facts.
All right, let's get into the Pat Facts.
Pat Facts.
So this is a surprising fact to me. Right at the start, Walt Disney was born on December 5th, 1901. So he's like you, almost Christmas baby. Uh-huh. He was born at 1249 Tripp Avenue in Chicago.
There it is.
He's a Chicagoan.
He is.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a Chicago connection to all these stories, yeah. I feel.
Where I went to college, there's a Walt Disney, I think maybe it's an elementary school or whatever in the city, but yeah, I guess I always kind of wondered why that, and that makes sense now.
Wow, okay. Well, Walt was the fourth son of Elias Disney, who was from Canada, actually.
Okay, so that sounds so weird. That like before Walt Disney, there was a Disney. Many branches of Disney's.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the name meant nothing. I mean, not nothing, but nothing like it is today.
No, I mean, Elias was definitely not at all like Walt. No. Walt's nationalities were Irish, German, and English, in case anybody, wanted to know. Walt had three brothers, Herbert, Raymond, and Roy, and he had one sister, Ruth.
And I am sure we'll talk about Roy, but that's the name I know.
A little tiny bit. When Walt was just 4 years old, the family moved to Missouri, where his uncle Robert had purchased land. So it's in Missouri where Walt found his love for drawing when he got paid to draw a picture of a horse of a retired neighborhood doctor.
Wow. I mean, he must have been drawing pretty well for even like a neighbor to hire him to draw something.
Absolutely. But think about this. So like, if he didn't move to Missouri, he would never have got that, lust for drawing.
Well, maybe. I mean, Chicago has a lot of things to draw.
But I mean, this is where he picked it up, though.
All right.
Or at least that style or whatever.
Sure, that's true.
Okay, so Elias was a subscriber to the Appeal to Reason newspaper. And Disney practiced drawing by copying the front page cartoons of Ryan Walker. Walt also lived near some major railways and became enamored with trains. The Disney family were active members of a congregational church. And in 1911, Walt and family moved to Kansas, where he befriended Walter Pfeiffer. Walter Pfeiffer's family were theater people, or theater nerds, as we are so called, and I am one of them, by the way, and introduced Walt to vaudeville and movies.
I wonder if Walter Pfeiffer is somehow related to Michelle Pfeiffer.
You can look it up.
I'll have to look it up.
Before long, Disney was spending more of his time at the Pfeiffer's house than at home. Elias had purchased a newspaper delivery route for the Kansas City Star and Kansas City Times. Walt and his brother, Roy, woke up at 4:30 every morning to deliver the Times before school and repeated the round for the Evening Star after school. So the schedule was exhausting, and Disney often received poor grades after falling asleep in class, but he continued his paper route for more than 6 years. So I've done a paper route when I was younger, and getting up that early, and it was like 7 days a week, pretty much. It's crazy. So he attended Saturday courses at Kansas City Art Institute and also took a corresponding course in cartooning. In 1917, Elias bought stock in a Chicago jelly producer, the Ozell Company.
Oh, interesting.
I've never heard of it.
Nope.
And he moved back to the city with his family. So if not for Missouri, though, he would not have had that interest in drawing. So, I mean, this is perfect. He went right back to Chicago then. Mm-hmm. You find anything about the Pfeiffer family?
It's hard to really tell. It looks like maybe Walt Pfeiffer was someone who worked on Disney projects later as animator.
He did, yes.
But I don't know with connection to Michelle.
Okay. Disney enrolled at McKinley High School. You've heard of McKinley. It's still around.
I have.
Yeah. And he became the cartoonist of the school newspaper. Of course, they probably didn't even have a cartoonist before that.
Right.
He's like, hey, this is what I can do. And they're like, cool, let's do it. He was drawing patriotic pictures about World War I. He also took night courses at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts. In 1918, he attempted to join the United States Army to fight the Germans, but he was rejected as he was too young. So he forged his date of birth on his birth certificate, and he joined the Red Cross in September of 1918 as an ambulance driver, and he was shipped out to France, but he arrived before November, where they signed a treaty where there would be no more war there.
I was going to say 1918, it's just about over.
Yeah, exactly. He drew cartoons on the side of his ambulance for decoration and had some of his work published in the Army newspaper called Stars and Stripes. You probably heard of that.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like he really just was that kid that just liked drawing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Was drawing everywhere.
Absolutely. He returned to Kansas City in October of 1919, where he worked as an apprentice artist at the Pesman Rubin Commercial Art Studio, where he drew commercials, illustrations for advertising, theater programs, and catalogs, and he befriended fellow artist Ub Iwerks. In January 1920, as Pesman Rubin's revenue declined after Christmas, Disney at age 18 and Iwerks were laid off, and they started their own business, the short-lived Iwerks Disney Commercial Artist. The company produced commercials using cutout animation technique, and Disney became interested in animation at that point, although he did prefer still drawing cartoons such as Mutt and Jeff and Max Fletcher's Out of the Inkwell. With the assistance of a borrowed book on animation and a camera, he began experimenting at home. And he came to the conclusion that cell animation was more promising than the cutout method. Rebecca, can you tell us what cell animation is?
The cell animation process was invented by Earl Hudd and John Bray in 1915. The cell is an important innovation to traditional animation, as it allows some parts of each frame to be repeated from frame to frame, thus saving labor. A simple example would be a scene with two characters on screen, one of which is talking and the other is standing silently. Since the latter character is not moving, it can display in the scene using only one drawing or on one cell, while multiple drawings on multiple cells are used to animate the speaking character.
Yeah.
So they're like clear, and you can kind of just replace it over top the one with the still character.
Kind of, yeah. It's used in it's actually called traditional animation now too.
Right.
But yeah, that's pretty much it though. Mm-hmm. So he was unable to persuade Cowger to try cell animation at the company. So Disney opened a new business with a coworker from the film ad company, Fred Harmon. Their main client was the local Newman Theater, and the short cartoons that they produced were sold as Newman's Laughograms.
Yeah, it is interesting to think that, I mean, he really did commercial art for a big part of the beginning of his career. And I think sometimes people that go into art think they can just do the fine art, right away.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's like, no, sometimes you got to do other things first.
Yeah.
And, while you're working on other stuff. Not always.
I mean, it is just he did a lot to get where he was.
Yeah.
I'm impressed by how much schooling he did while he was still in high school and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Going to night school, and it's just he did a lot of things. So if you want to be successful, it's possible. You just might have to do double the work.
Yeah.
So in May of 1921. The success of the Laughograms led to the establishment of Laughogram Studio, for which he hired more animators, including Fred Harmon's brother, Hugh, Rudolph Ising, and Iwerks. Disney moved to Hollywood in July of 1923 at 21 years old. Although New York was the center of the cartoon industry, he was attracted to Los Angeles because his brother Roy was recovering from tuberculosis there, and he hoped to become a live-action film director.
So all of that was before he was 21.
Right? Yeah.
Amazing.
Walt and his brother Roy formed the Disney Brothers Company, or studio. Later, it became Walt Disney Company to produce some of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland comedies. The first official Walt Disney studio was established at 2725 Hyperion Avenue. The building was demolished in 1940, though. Early in 1925, Disney hired a ink artist, Lillian Bonds. They married in July of that year.
I see.
Walt and Iwerks developed a new character named Mickey Mouse, who might have been inspired by a pet mouse that Walt had adopted while working in his Laughogram studio. Walt's original choice of the name was Mortimer Mouse. Can you imagine?
Yeah, doesn't quite roll off the tongue as well.
Yeah, good thing his wife Lillian thought it too pompous and suggested Mickey instead.
Oh, good job, Lillian.
Disney, who had begun to distance himself from the animation process, provided Mickey's voice until 1947. In the words of one of Disney's employees, Ub designed Mickey's physical appearance, but Walt gave him his soul.
No.
That version of Mickey Mouse is now lost in its copyright and can be used by anyone.
Yeah, people think of it as the Steamboat Willie version.
Yeah, or the black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Disney had a nervous breakdown in October 1931, caused from a lot of work that he was doing at that time and negotiations he had with people. So he and Lillian took an extended holiday to Cuba and a cruise to Panama to recover. Disney Studios signed a contract with Columbia Pictures to distribute the Mickey Mouse cartoons, which became increasingly popular, including internationally. Disney and his crew also introduced new cartoon stars like Pluto in 1930, Goofy in 1932, and Donald Duck in 1934.
All good ones.
Yeah. In 1933, Disney produced Three Little Pigs, a film described by the media historian Adrian Danks as the most successful short animation of all time.
Wow.
The film won Disney another Academy Award in the short subject cartoon category, and the film's success led to further increase in the studio staff, which numbered nearly 200 by the end of the year. By 1934, Disney had become dissatisfied with producing formulaic cartoon shorts and believed a feature-length cartoon would be more profitable. So the studio began the 4-year production of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs based on the fairy tale. Snow White premiered in December of 1937 to high praise from critics and audience.
I remember that. I don't remember. I wasn't
You remember
around,
that?
But I remember hearing that
Maybe
was
you're a ghost then.
That was a really big deal. I don't think there had really been like too much of like full movie animations before, especially
for kids.
for kids and being that successful. It was big.
Yeah, back then the theater was something you did with your whole entire family.
Mm-hmm.
So to have something just for the kids was different.
Yeah.
And kids would go by themselves to the theater then, too.
Yeah, there you
Just
go.
to see that. With work on Snow White finished, the studio began producing Pinocchio in early 1938 and Fantasia in November of that same year. Both films were released in 1940, and neither performed well at the box office.
Wow.
Partly because revenues from Europe had dropped following the start of the World War II in 1939. The studio had a ton of loss on both pictures and was deeply in debt by the end of February 1941.
Wow. I mean, I guess I can figure Fantasia, a lot of people with classical
Pinocchio?
music, but Pinocchio.
Yeah.
Wow.
In response to the financial crisis, Disney did not act exactly well. Walt and his brother Roy started the company's first public stock offering in 1940 and implemented heavy salary cuts.
Okay.
Yeah, the later measures and Disney's sometimes high-handed and insensitive manner of dealing with staff led to a 1941 animator strike, which lasted 5 weeks.
Okay.
So the strike temporarily interrupted the studio's next production of Dumbo, 1941, which Disney produced in a simple and inexpensive manner. The film received a positive reaction from audience and critics alike. Shortly after the release of Dumbo in October of 1941, the U.S. entered World War II. Disney formed the Walt Disney's Training Film Unit within the company to produce instructional films for the military, such as 4 methods of flushing, riveting, and aircraft production methods.
And I did hear that the Army or the government asked him to do that too. I think he wanted to. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but it was definitely a collaboration between the government and the Disney studios, for sure.
And also during this time, he ramped up production of Donald Duck, as he was a sailor. So that kind of fit into things.
Makes sense.
People were more patriotic at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in the early 1950s, though, Disney produced Cinderella, his studio's first animated feature in 8 years. It was popular with the critics and theater audiences. Costing $2.2 million to produce, it earned nearly $8 million in its first year.
There you go.
For several years, Disney had been considering building a theme park. When he visited Griffith Park in Los Angeles with his daughters, he wanted it to be a clean, unspoiled park where both children and their parents could have fun. In March of 1952, he received zoning permission to build a theme park in Burbank near the Disney studios. But this site proved to be way too small for what he wanted. And a larger plot in Anaheim, which was 35 miles south of the studio, was purchased. To distance the project from the studio, which might attract criticism of shareholders, remember it was now a open commodity.
Right.
Disney formed WED and Enterprises, now Walt Disney Imagineering, and used his own money to fund a group of designers and animators to work on plans. Those involved became known as the Imagineers. And in mid-1954, Disney sent his Imagineers to every amusement park in the United States to analyze what worked and what pitfalls or problems there were in the various locations and incorporated their findings into his design. Construction work started in July of 1954 and Disneyland opened in July of 1955. The opening ceremony was broadcast on ABC, which reached 70 million viewers.
All right.
So that was definitely a good publicity stunt for them.
Mm-hmm.
The park was designed as a series of themed lands linked by the central Main Street. So you have USA, a replica of the Main Street in his hometown of Marcellin. The connected themed areas were Adventureland, Frontierland, Fantasyland, and Tomorrowland. ABC was a major contributor to Disneyland. What they got out of the deal, though, was a TV spot, one of the most popular being the Mickey Mouse Club.
There you go. And I just want to stop for a second because if you haven't been to Disneyland, it's really different. I grew up going to Disney World because we're kind of on the other side of the country and I had family down there. But I have gone to Disneyland a couple times and it's it's so much different. Like Disney World, it's like a big deal to get there. Like you have to go through all these layers of parking lots and all this stuff. Whereas Disneyland, it's just like going to like a Six Flags almost. I mean, it's bigger. Don't get me wrong, but like
people don't know what Six Flags is necessarily, though.
Well,
just a smaller
they're
theme
more
park.
around.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they're around the country, but like a regular theme park where like you can almost kind of drive around it a little bit.
Sure.
It's just different, but there's a lot similar between them.
So for those that don't know, the Mickey Mouse Club was a variety show catering specifically to children. And it had a lot of stars in it like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, JT. Yeah. In late 1965, he announced plans to develop another theme park to be called Disney World. Now it's called Walt Disney World. A few miles southwest of Orlando, Florida. Disney World was to include the Magic Kingdom, a larger and more elaborate version of Disneyland, plus golf courses and resort hotels. The heart of Disney World was known as the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, or EPCOT for short, which he described as
an experimental prototype community of tomorrow that will take its cue from the new ideas and new technologies that are now emerging from the creative centers of American industry. It will be a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and systems. And Epcot will always be a showcase to the world for the ingenuity and imagination of American free enterprise.
All right, so you've been to Epcot a bunch of times, right?
Yes.
Now, would you say that it lives up to that definition?
No. They ended up having to make changes, and it really became more of a theme park rather than, what he talked about there. For a long time, there were these I forget what they were called, like the communication or commuter. I'm sorry. The Disney fans are like freaking out right now at me, but, like right when you walk in, and they would like that's the first place I saw HD TV, and stuff like that. And that kind of went away. I don't know. I think they've revamped it since the last time I was there, but, so they have some of this, but it's nothing like what he had originally imagined.
So what's the ride that was in the like dome type area?
Oh yeah, the ride in the dome is of course I can't remember the name.
Was it the World of Tomorrow?
Well, the whole area is kind of like is like the World of Tomorrow, but it's the ride, at least, and they could be called that. Again, I'm sorry, I'm a Disney file, but like not that much of one. But it's the ride where it goes through the history of communication. Yeah,
and it also talks about things that they're going to be coming up with, like the flying cars and stuff like that. Yeah,
they will put a bunch of the rides in there. Will talk about like future stuff.
I remember going through that. So. Yeah. All right, Disney had been a heavy smoker since World War I. He did not use cigarettes with filters, and he smoked a pipe as a young man. In early 1966, he was diagnosed with lung cancer and was treated with cobalt therapy.
I've never heard of cobalt therapy.
Yeah. On November 30th, he felt unwell and was taken by ambulance from his home to St. Joseph's Hospital, where on December 15th, at age 65, he died of circulatory collapse. Caused by the cancer. His remains were cremated 2 days later, and his ashes interred at the Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California.
So, before we wrap up the history, because I know some of you right now are thinking, but wait, So we wanted to make sure we talk about this cryogenic theory that's out there. So in early 1967, right? So not long after he died, right? Because he died December 15th in 66, right? So just a few weeks later, a reporter for the tabloid newspaper called the National Spotlight claimed he had snuck into St. Joseph's Hospital in Burbank, directly across the street from the Disney studios and where he was treated during his final illness. As the story went, the reporter disguised himself as an orderly, broke into a storage room and saw the deceased Disney suspended in a cryogenic metal cylinder.
Whoa.
Some went as far as to claim his burial spot was a freezer stored underneath the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland. So that's a common story. In 1969, the French magazine Ici, Paris, and later still the National Tattler in the United States,
National Tattler
advanced the rumors by predicting Disney would be thawed out in 1975. Some went as far as to claim that his burial spot was a freezer. Oh, sorry, underneath the Pirates. Sorry, that was from a different one. And then there were several former Disney employees who continued to spread false stories about these big freezes. During the 1990s, there were more discredited legends with expert quotes. Basically, none of this is true. What you said is absolutely true. He was, in fact, cremated.
His whole entire body, including his head. Small private service, only attended by his wife and his daughters and their husbands and children. I mean, I think people want it to be true because they want him to come back, and he did like future stuff, but yeah. There's few men that I would say that changed the world, and he's definitely one of them.
Yeah. And I think anytime, like it wasn't on TV, we didn't see things, then there's just all these rumors that happened. But it's crazy to me that it started like right basically when he died.
Well, remember in The Walking Dead, if you don't see somebody die.
Yeah, there you go. If they're just hiding behind a garbage
dumpster,
bin,
yeah. So, well, that's all I got for the history. I mean, that's it. Yeah, I mean, I could probably whip up another half hour if you give me some time, but I don't think we need it. Yeah. I don't think we need it. I think that's enough to summarize the man's life. I mean, I hope one day somebody does a ghostly about me and they have a tough time summarizing up the history of the person. Because, that's a tribute to Walt's success, is that it's impossible to say it all in an hour-long podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he was really close to his brother who took over after him. And he, loved his kids, but I think his big part of his story was really his legacy he left us with movies and the parks and everything.
Absolutely. He put everything into those things. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So we're going to take another break. And when we return, we're going to get to the debate. All right, Rebecca, are you ready for a debate?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so guests claim to see ghosts all the time at Disney World and Disneyland, both places.
Yeah.
And especially of Walt Disney himself. Mm-hmm. So there is one amateur paranormal investigator who would not reveal their name because they didn't want to get any cast members in trouble. But she said that she was once in the park after hours. I'm assuming it's the cast member too, maybe the cast member let her in to do the investigating. I don't know. But says she was once in the park after hours when she saw something in Fantasyland. Mm-hmm. We saw a man standing just outside the castle on the drawbridge. He smiled and waved, she said, recognizing him as Walt. He stayed for about 20 seconds and then slowly disappeared. It was the second time the cast member friend who had let her into the park after hours had seen Walt at the park.
Okay.
So I have heard many versions of this story, but it's I mean, it's the same story. So it's
Yeah.
that they saw
Always in Fantasyland?
on that bridge.
Okay. So I'm going to say that given the size and the nature of the park, it is meant to distort your perspective, right? Because you're in Fantasyland, Adventureland. These are not things you would find in California at that particular location. So I just think it is something that is already distorting your perspective, and that the idea of Walt Disney himself can distort your perspective and make you think of stuff like that, especially the legends surrounding him with his head being frozen and stuff. I mean, everybody knows that, and people talk about it and stuff. And if you're going to Disney, you have an idea of who Walt Disney was.
I mean, I guess I will say, is it possible that it was a ghost of another man? Possibly. Maybe they assume it's Walt.
I don't think it's a ghost at all. I think it's just like an illusion. So
okay.
I'm going to give it a 0.
Okay. Well, I am going to give it a 6.
6. Okay.
That's
not that high for you. I mean, you've
No,
gone
I
higher.
think there's other ones that see, because again, for me, do I think they saw something? Yes, but it's hard to know for sure because it wasn't like they were right next to it.
Okay. So that's why not higher?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. It could have been somebody else or
Sure.
whatever.
I think it's a person if they saw anything at all. Yeah.
All right. So another cast member, former cast member, Daryl Wagner has 2 ghost stories. So we'll do one, we'll talk about it, and then we'll do the other.
Okay.
The first one he says is about Walt Disney's love of trains. So you mentioned that as in your history. And in particular, the Disneyland Railroad that circles the park. Quote, the train command center has a board that shows where the trains are on the track, he says. Late at night, in the far corner, a train would show on the board and the whistle would blow, even though there was no train out there. The old guys used to say that's Walt's train. So this guy spoke out on the record about it, but there's definitely been a lot of stories from employees about this over the years.
I'm thinking it's glitchy equipment, and that it wouldn't matter much because of the late at night time, that it's like, well, we don't really need to fix this right away because, I mean, obviously there's no train, but it's just glitchy machinery.
But only glitchy at night? Like
Maybe it's glitchy during the day too, but there's trains actually running on the track, so they don't notice that. Or maybe it's because of the lack of trains and the equipment still being on that they notice it. I don't know.
I think Walt is definitely doing it. He loves trains, and he's waiting till nighttime. Well, his ghost loves trains, and he does it. I mean, he's got this like whole park to haunt. Like, how fun is that? And so sometimes he goes and he plays with the trains, and sometimes he's hanging out on the bridge.
I'm going to give it a 0,
it.
Rebecca. I'm sorry.
All right, this one's a 7 for me.
7, wow.
We have a person who put their name on the story.
Yeah, they did.
And they're referring to other employees who have also seen it.
Okay.
All right. Next one. This is the other story from Daryl. He says has to do with Walt Disney's famous smoking habit. This is super common for people to tell stories like this. Lillian Disney made sure that Walt wasn't seen smoking in public areas around kids. So he used to go out to the staircase behind his apartment to smoke. As I mentioned earlier, Walt literally had an apartment on property at Disneyland. He used to go behind his apartment to smoke, Wagner says. After Walt died, my security supervisor used to smell cigarette smoke back there almost every night. He used to try to hide to catch the smoker. He never did and never found cigarette butts, but he always smelled fresh smoke. He finally concluded it was Walt sneaking a last smoke.
Well, as a former smoker, although I'm sure I didn't smoke as much as Walt did, people back in those days would smoke like 4-5 packs a day.
Yeah.
Sometimes that could get, the smell of the cigarettes can get stuck in rocks, can get stuck in woodwork, and it can be there forever if it's not properly disinfected. So I'm thinking that it's just lingering I think he is smelling cigarettes.
Yeah.
I think literally it is the cigarettes.
I think the only thing is that he says it smelled like fresh smoke as opposed to like there is a definite difference when it's like old stale smoke smell.
I don't know. I quit smoking about a year ago, and I can still taste it sometimes. Yeah. So I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say that it could be in the walls or whatever, even outside. So I'm going to give this one a 0 as well.
Okay. I mean, again, this is a particular person sharing a story that he heard.
Yeah, this is the same guy as the last one. Yeah.
But there are other people, more people have also claimed to smell it.
Also he heard it from somebody else. So it's not firsthand account. It's secondhand.
No. Again, it's a common one though.
Yeah.
So for me, this one's a 6.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. We have one more.
All right.
Okay. So there's a lot of hauntings at Disney or claims of hauntings. Again, we just did an episode, Ghostly X episode live on the Haunted Mansion. So if you want to go listen to that, there's other rides that people claim are haunted, but we're again focusing on Walt Disney himself.
Yeah.
Okay. So one last story that this goes back to the story that I told at the beginning. So many claim that Walt Disney is still at the park. He had an office over the fire station on Main Street, and cast members say they would turn the light off only to have it turn back on by itself. There's been many employees that have claimed to experience this over the years. Sometimes they even claim to see him in shadow next to the light.
Okay.
One employee even claimed to see Walt when he went back in to figure out who had turned the light back on.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with the light itself. So that particular location is 60, 70 years old. Okay. Imagine the wiring that goes into a theme park. Imagine how complicated that is. There's so much electricity being drawn, so many wires, so many controls. It surprises me that they don't automate that more. Why do they have somebody actually in charge of turning off the light? That seems weird. So I am going to say, first of all, it might be automated and it's not its time to be turned off, so it turns itself back on. But second, maybe it's just faulty wiring. I mean, it is possible that this is 70 years old. I don't think they've rewired the whole entire place since then.
Well, I think they do a lot. I will say the stories of this started, pretty early on after he passed.
Yeah.
So it's been going on a while. I had actually read in one place and then I couldn't find it anywhere else. Again, I'm sure, somebody that works at the park would know, but that there was a time where they just kept the light on all the time because they were like tired of dealing with him turning it back on.
I mean, okay, well, think about it. Nintendo, the original Nintendo, you had to blow in the cartridges, and Super Nintendo, you had to blow in the cartridges. From the regular Nintendo to Super Nintendo, they didn't fix the problem. Okay, it was a known problem. It affected every single person. They didn't do anything to fix it. It's because it is not the most exact thing to fix these kind of things.
But it doesn't do it during the day.
Maybe it does. Maybe people just don't see it because the light's on already. Or because it's light outside. But again, I don't know why they don't automate that.
I mean, and maybe by now they have. I don't know. But,
yeah. So
these stories have been around a long time.
I'm going to call BS on this one. I'm sorry. This one is totally, I don't think it is possible because they would have done something about that already.
Now, what do you claim, though, or what do you say about the claims that people see Walt?
I think they want to see Walt. I think that's the reason why. And because they know about the light thing. I think that's why. And it's I don't know. It's just it's like the placebo effect kind of thing. They know about this and it doesn't do anything to them, but all of a sudden it has some kind of result.
I mean, so again, the employee there that went back in afterward.
That's one employee. We don't know the name of this particular employee.
No, just heard it was the security guard.
So it could just be made up too. So I'm saying it's just one employee that we hear of, but we don't know a name. And it's bunched in with the story. So I'm just going to say it could be made up.
It could be.
So,
or it could be true.
What's easier to believe?
that it's true.
That it's made up. It's easier to
that
believe
all
that
these
it's made
people
up.
are lying. No, I
Zero.
believe it's
Zero,
true.
zero, zero. And in fact, if I can go negative on this one, I would.
I'm gonna give this one a 7.
All right.
Again, a 7. This one's a big one. This one's very common. A story a lot of people know. If there was one place this man was going to haunt, it would be his apartment, for sure. You know, I mean, I think it's hard because we have stories from specific people. We have stories that are told to other people, but they're all there. They're all the stories. So I think there's a lot to think about.
So what would be your overall rating then?
So my overall rating is going to be 7 because I can't do a half.
Okay. Mine is going to be 0. I did 0 for every single one of them. So I'm going to go 0. Unfortunately, I mean, you know, it would be cool to have something like this, but if this was so prevalent, then they can just send investigators there and everybody would know.
Disney's not going to do that.
Okay, well, that brings us to the closing arguments. This is our last chance to convince you to vote our way. We are each given 1 minute of uninterrupted time. We will time each other on our cell phones to keep each other honest. Rebecca, are you ready?
I am ready.
And go.
Okay. So as I said, there are a lot of stories, very common stories that have been told over the years with the cigarette smoke and the light specifically. But also, you know, people seeing him in different places in the park. And while I can definitely buy the fact that, you know, hey, if it was somebody you saw across the way and it was a shadow, you don't know. But when you're in his apartment and you're seeing him when the light is turning itself off or on, you know, every night or multiple times a night, I'm sorry, I think there's something there. And, you know, we do have people that have given their names. We have people that have told these stories. And there's just too many. So
right.
I believe that it is haunted.
Okay. You still had like 10 seconds left.
I know.
Wow.
I didn't need a whole lot of time because it's haunted.
All right.
All right. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. Go.
So there's nothing saying that it happens every single night. It happens some nights. And therefore, it seems so irregular that I would say that it couldn't be a ghost because ghost would happen more regular. It'd be like a more common thing that would happen. So I'm thinking that this is something that is more just electrical. The smoking one, I mean, come on. You can smell smoke on an area where a smoker was for a very long time. All the rest of the stuff, I just think is just a bunch of speculatory things. I mean, I don't think there's any real evidence to go by in this one, to tell you the truth. So I'm going to say not haunted. You can vote whichever way you would like, but make sure you go vote at ghostlypodcast.com and go to the polls section.
Absolutely. We need your vote.
Absolutely. So I want to thank everyone so much for listening. Please share us with your friends and family, as word of mouth is our best advertisement. And make sure you tell everyone we're back. Okay?
Absolutely.
We took a little sabbatical there, but we are back.
We are back.
Remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so yet already. And we have some VIP producers that I would like to bring up in this particular episode. We have Andrew,
Alicia,
Becky,
Kim,
Ernie,
Cindy,
Kevin,
Jessica,
Alice,
Aaron,
Hope,
and Candy.
Yes. And on the next episode, what are we going to be talking about, Rebecca?
We're going to talk about the Anchorage Hotel.
Oh, we're going to Alaska.
Before the winter ends, we're going to Alaska.
Have you been watching that True Detective?
I have. It's
so
fun.
Alaska based, and not exactly Anchorage, but you know, as close as we can get to there.
Super
and
creepy.
That comes out on February 21st. So until next time, stay ghostly.
Bye.